India's G20 presidency a roaring success with the New Delhi declaration and the inclusion of the African Union. Big diplomatic breakthroughs at the G20 summit in New Delhi. The Prime Minister greets world media at the Bharat Mandapam as he hands over the gavel to Brazil. With India's Ukraine milestone at the G20 summit, world leaders react. Macron says India's G20 confirms Russia's isolation. This, as Russia's Lavrov says, we didn't allow the agenda to be Ukrainized. Turkey's Erdogan, meanwhile, says we are pushing to stop the Ukraine war. And the big diplomatic takeaway, the India-Middle East-Europe corridor is sealed at the G20 summit, India's mega economic corridor to counter China and its Belt and Road push. The Prime Minister's strong remarks on anti-India elements in Canada. Over extremist elements, the Prime Minister conveys concerns in bilateral with Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau, meanwhile, says we discussed Khalistan extremism with Prime Minister Modi and we condemn hate and extremism. Ex-Andhra Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu sent to 14-day judicial custody. Naidu was arrested in a 371 crore rupee corruption case. Our lead story, well, the 3-day G20 summit in the national capital has concluded, and what a milestone of an event it has been. Well, the Prime Minister has handed over the presidency to Brazil, with the Prime Minister handing over the gavel to Brazilian President Lula da Silva, who praised India for being the voice of the global South and a leader in a sense of the developing economies. Of course, the big takeaways were the New Delhi declaration, how it got various countries to agree on that paragraph on Ukraine. Of course, many economic deals as well, including that India, Middle East, Europe transnational economic corridor. Of course, also the discussion around digital public infrastructure. So many big takeaways of India's G20 presidency. And China and Russia, whose heads of state skipped the summit, were also in agreement with the New Delhi declaration. The declaration called on all the states not to use force to grab territory, but it avoided condemning Russia for the war in Ukraine. So, of course, a big success there as far as India's G20 presidency is concerned, which has been a big diplomatic outlier. Here are the big moments of India's G20 presidency, the final day today.
भारत आप सभी का हार्दिक स्वागत करता है।
The final day of the G20 summit in Delhi began with world leaders gathering at the Rajghat to pay homage to the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, an icon of peace across the world. Prime Minister Narendra Modi presented the world leaders with khadi shawls, a symbol of non-violent resistance. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and his wife Akshata Murthy also took some time out to visit Akshardham, a spiritual cultural campus in Delhi, to offer prayers. Later, in a symbolic commitment to fight climate change, a planting ceremony was held at the Bharat Mandapam. In the quest towards sustainability and clean energy, G20 earlier announced a global biofuels alliance.
Excellencies, I would now request Honorable Prime Minister of India to press the light globe placed at the lectern before him and launch the Global Biofuel Alliance.
Apart from that, G20 members unanimously adopted the Delhi Declaration, which called on nations to uphold territorial integrity and not use force to grab territory.
मैं इस declaration को adopt करने की घोषणा करता हूँ.
The inclusion of the African Union, launch of the digital payment infrastructure and India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor are some of the other historic announcements made by the G20 under India's presidency.
This is a real big deal. And I want to thank you, Mr.
With this, India hands over the gavel to Brazil, marking the ceremonial transfer of the G20 presidency.
प्रेसिडेंसी का केवल सौंपता हूं। मैं ब्राजील के राष्ट्रपति और मेरे मित्र लुला डी सिल्वा को हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं देता हूं और मैं उनको प्रेसिडेंसी का गेवल सौंपता हूं।
What incredible visuals there. But one of the major takeaways was the ambitious plans for a corridor linking Europe, the Middle East and India. Well, that corridor was unveiled. It's going to have major diplomatic ramifications, and it also comes as an answer to China's Belt and Road push. What does it mean diplomatically and economically? Here's a report.
This is a big deal. This is a real big deal. And I want to thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. One Earth, one family, one future. That's the focus of this G20 summit. And in many ways, it's also the focus of this partnership. We're focusing on regional infrastructure projects that deliver results across multiple countries and in multiple sectors. And today, I'm proud to announce that we've finalized the historic agreement for a new India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor.
An ambitious and historic plan for a corridor linking Europe, the Middle East and India, announced on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Delhi.
This is a real big deal. I want to thank
Even as China looked on, the Europe-Middle East-India Trade Corridor Plan is a part of a partnership for global infrastructure and investment. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Biden brought together 6 G20 leaders to accelerate investments into high-quality infrastructure projects and the development of economic corridors. So why is this corridor so important? To begin with, there will be 2 separate corridors, an East corridor connecting India to West Asia and a Northern corridor connecting West Asia to Europe. India, the United States, UAE, Saudi Arabia, France, Germany, Italy and the European Union signed the MOU. India will be connected to Europe by a railway line and existing ports through the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Israel. This means faster and cheaper economic growth while incentivizing new investments and creating quality jobs. 2 continents will be connected to commercial hubs. Facilitating the development and export of clean energy is also a key aim of this project, as is ensuring food security and strengthening supply chains. Energy grids and telecommunication lines will be linked through undersea cables to expand reliable access to electricity. Developing infrastructure to enable the production and transport of green hydrogen is also on the cards, and they will connect people to secure and stable internet.
PGII के माध्यम से हम ग्लोबल साउथ के देशों में इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर गैप को कम करने में महत्वपूर्ण योगदान दे सकते हैं। फ्रेंड्स, भारत कनेक्टिविटी को क्षेत्रीय सीमाओं में नहीं मापता। सभी क्षेत्रों के साथ कनेक्टिविटी बढ़ाना भारत की मुख्य प्राथमिकता है। हमारा मानना है कि कनेक्टिविटी विभिन्न देशों के बीच आपसी व्यापारी नहीं, आपसी विश्वास भी बढ़ाने का स्रोत है।
Many are viewing this initiative as a counter to China's Belt and Road push on global infrastructure. With this partnership, Washington and the European Union are emerging as alternative partners and investors for developing countries.
This corridor is much more than just a railway or a cable. It is a green and digital bridge across continents and civilizations.
The efforts made by India to push Global South at the center of G20 presidency has been one of the top highlights of this global event. Remember, G20 evolved out of an economic crisis, and this shows a shift in the global outlook. From the launch of a transnational economic corridor to the inclusion of the African Union in G20 presidency, India is putting all efforts to ensure that developing countries are at the center of tomorrow's world. With Shrishti Shankar and camera person Pavan, this is Vasudha Venugopal for NDTV.
And when India's push for digital public infrastructure has been very evident through its presidency, in fact, India has now sought to evolve a global framework as far as digital public infrastructure is concerned. What could this possible framework look like? Priyanshi has the details.
While India's G20 presidency has been an outlier for several reasons and will shape future global decisions on several fronts, one particular area that has been successfully pushed by India is digital public infrastructure, or DPIs. For the first time ever, the G20 reached a global consensus on what ought to be the DPI's definition, the framework and principles. For the first time ever, DPI's digital public infrastructure, that section has been adopted by the G20 under India's presidency. For the previous G20s, DPIs never found a place. But this sounds complicated as of now. So let's decode one by one. First things first, what really is DPI? DPI stands for Digital Public Infrastructure. It means any digital platform through which fast and secure service delivery can be provided to the public. So, since it's a public good, as the name goes, it is backed by the government for the benefit of the citizens and for the benefit of both the private and the public sectors. So that's the definition. In India, we call the collection of these services the India stack. Let's understand with examples. UPI, DigiLocker, Diksha and CoWIN are all a part of the India stack, and they are examples of digital public infrastructure. And UPI has truly been an Indian platform that is used as an example globally. UPI is a payment system through which money can be transferred to people's accounts real time with no cost, and it has given Indians the freedom to go cashless. Now, the United Payments Interface, or UPI, has crossed the 10 billion mark in the volume terms of transactions in the month of August. In fact, UPI has also been adopted in 8 countries, including in developed countries such as Singapore. Next, another example is DigiLocker, which is a digital locker for all your government documents. Along with that, you've also had Diksha platform, which helps students continue studying even during COVID. While we are on the subject of COVID, we can't forget CoWIN, which helped COVID-19 vaccination really reach the last mile. 110 crore people are registered on CoWIN, and most Indians got vaccinated through this very platform. Now, India's DPI is proving to be an example for even the developed world. I'm not saying it's coming right from the World Bank. The World Bank said that India achieved remarkable landmark in just 6 years in the DPI front. Accomplishments that would typically have taken nearly 5 decades, India achieved those in just 6 years. So setting examples in DPIs and globally being an inspiration, but what did India really achieve on this front at the G20? As I said, DPIs have finally found a place in the G20 declaration for the first time under India's G20 presidency. For India, importantly, the declaration that has been adopted has welcomed India's plan to build and maintain a global digital public infrastructure repository, or the GDPIR. Now, what is this? It will be a virtual repository of digital public infrastructure voluntarily shared by G20 members and beyond. So G20 members will share their technology, digital public infrastructure, which can be used by other member countries as well. The IT ministry says this will be like a central bank to share technology with countries that are lagging behind free of cost. Now, this will be a big boost for India's DPIs, as they will now be highlighted and are likely to be adopted in more and more countries. So this has been adopted, but it remains to be seen when it actually turns into a reality, but definitely a further boost for India's digital public infrastructure.
So, well, India has really emerged as a voice of the global south, and one big push where India has truly walked the talk is green energy transition. And on the sidelines of the G20 summit, PM Modi also announced a biofuels alliance, a global biofuels alliance, of which India, US and Brazil are founding members. How could this be a game changer as far as clean energy transition is concerned? Here's a report.
Walking the talk on pushing green energy transition as a collective responsibility, Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched the Global Biofuel Alliance on the sidelines of the New Delhi G20 summit. Singapore, Bangladesh, Italy, the United States of America, Brazil, Argentina, Mauritius and the United Arab Emirates were all part of the launch. A total of 19 countries and 12 international organizations have so far agreed to join the alliance. Prime Minister Modi called on countries to join the initiative and set a global target of blending 20% ethanol with petrol.
I think it's going to be one of the more tangible things to talk about for the years to come, both for our biofuels, for our development. We're already on the process of making 20% biofuels by the 2025, but also in our transition to net zero.
The three founding members of the alliance, the United States, India and Brazil, contributed about 85% of the global production and 81% of consumption of ethanol. Brazil has taken over the G20 presidency from India. The New Delhi Declaration also took note of the launch of the alliance, despite the presence of OPEC countries such as Russia and Saudi Arabia. The alliance aims at speeding up global use of biofuels by facilitating technology innovations. Other than that, substituting traditional fuels with sustainable biofuels, as well as ensuring standard setting and certification, both of these aspects are also parts of the alliance's mandate.
We can use biotechnology, increase the production of biomass, and by using biomass like bamboo and other things, we can make bioethanol, bio-CNG. This is to be a great start as far as the historical event is concerned. It is going to reduce the pollution in the world, and it is going to helpful for the agriculture and rural economy, creating more employment potential and growth in agriculture, rural, tribal and forest area. So this is really a win-win situation, and at the same time it's going to reduce the import, which is economically very important as far as Atmanirbhar Bharat is concerned.
So why exactly are biofuels a game changer? Well, unlike traditional fossil fuels, biofuels are made from natural biomass, that is plant, algae or animal waste based, making them sustainable. They can also act as substitutes for petrol, diesel and LPG. Biofuels are of course also carbon neutral and can help reduce greenhouse emissions. The Indian government has advanced its target to achieve 20% ethanol blending in petrol by 2025 to 26 from an earlier target of 2030. The target of petrol supplies with 10% ethanol blending was achieved in June last year, ahead of the original schedule of November 2022. In New Delhi with Srishti Shankar, Priyanshi Sharma for NDTV.
And on the sidelines of the G20 summit, the Prime Minister held various bilaterals, and one of them was with Canada's Justin Trudeau. The Prime Minister has conveyed concerns about continuing anti-India activities of extremist elements in Canada in that bilateral. Well, Canada has been one of the favoured hubs of expat Sikhs, where extremism has surfaced, particularly in the past couple of months. Various Indian diplomats have been targets of this extremism. The Prime Minister conveyed to Trudeau that these elements are promoting secessionism and inciting violence, and that the nexus of such forces with organised crime. Ex-Andhra Chief Minister and Telugu Desam Party Chief N. Chandrababu Naidu has been sent to 14-day judicial custody in connection with an alleged Skill Development Corporation corruption scam. Now remember, he was arrested by the Andhra Pradesh CID in connection with an alleged corruption case, and he has now been sent to a 14-day judicial custody. He was produced in court earlier in the day.